Today we're out in the forest taking a look at the Infiniti QX50. The QX50 started its life as the Infiniti EX35, but recently Infiniti decided to rebadge all of their products, Q for sedan and QX for crossover. But the QX50 is more than just that original vehicle with QX instead of EX. We actually get a different engine under the hood than the vehicle launched with. We have a 3.7-liter V6, not a 3.5-liter V6, and we have a significant stretch to the vehicle overall. The reason Infiniti put the QX50 on the taffy stretcher and gave us about 4 inches more rear legroom is because the original EX35, although it was designed to compete with the BMW X3, had legroom in the back and cargo room in the back more similar to the BMW X1. Thanks to the extra room in the back, the QX50 now very directly competes with the BMW X3. That's a good thing for the Infiniti brand because Infiniti has their all-new baby crossover, the QX30, and that definitely directly competes with the Audi Q3 and the BMW X1. Although the QX50 wears Infiniti's latest grille right up front and LED headlamps below, this is actually riding on one of Infiniti's older platforms. This is more closely related to the old Infiniti G than the current Infiniti Q50. Interestingly enough, the QX50 and the QX70 are actually very closely related. Now that's definitely a good thing when it comes to handling for the Infiniti QX because the Infiniti G was simply one of the best handling vehicles in its segment. But it does mean that the overall look of the vehicle is a little bit less modern than something like the Infiniti QX30 or the Infiniti Q50. The big difference between this overall front-end design and most modern Infinitis can be found right here in this very large and stylized headlamp module. It stretches all the way from over here by the grille all the way back here to about the point that the front axle starts. I'd love to know what you think about this overall design down there in the comment section down below, so be sure and let me know. But I have to say, as much as I like the design of the Infiniti Q50, this particular front end isn't doing it for me. As I said earlier, the QX50 started its life as one of the more compact entries in the compact luxury car segment. But because Infiniti realized that they needed more rear legroom in order to compete with something like a BMW X3 or the Audi Q5, they took the QX50 and they stretched it by over 3 inches, making the rear legroom figure about 4.3 inches higher than the first generation EX35. And that difference is all back here in the rear door. The stretching hasn't just improved rear legroom, I think it's also improved the overall profile of the vehicle because it's given the QX50 a slightly longer look. Infiniti opted to give the QX50 more of a sportback style, sort of like the BMW X4 rather than a very vertical hatch like the BMW X3. However, one thing is without doubt, we still have a very solid rear-wheel drive look to the overall vehicle with this long hood up front. Out back, you'll definitely notice the sportback slope to the rear glass, although the metal portion of the tailgate is a little bit more upright. We have a tasteful amount of chrome going on back here, tail lamp modules that are actually just on the outside of the vehicle, although the red trim does extend into the tailgate, and that's where you'll find the backup lamps. The turn signals are actually located down there low on the rear bumper. Unlike most of the competition, there is just one engine on offer in the QX50, so all models do get the twin exhaust tips. Under the hood of the QX50, we find something unusual, a standard V6 engine. This is Infiniti's 3.7-liter V6, also seeing duty under the hood of the Q50 and the larger Q70. In this vehicle, it produces 325 horsepower and 267 pound-feet of torque. This engine is mated to a 7-speed automatic transmission in all versions, and it sends power to the rear wheels by default, but you can opt for an optional all-wheel drive system. Whether you get the rear-wheel drive or the all-wheel drive model, 20 miles per gallon is what the EPA says you should average. Although we'll obviously talk about this later in the QX50 review, this standard V6 engine is a very big differentiator between the Infiniti and the rest of the competition. This vehicle starts at $34,450. That's about $13,000 less than a 6-cylinder BMW X3 with about the same kind of horsepower and about the same kind of 0 to 60 score under the hood. This is also about $12,000 less than an Audi Q5 with their 6-cylinder engine, significantly less expensive than the Mercedes GLC with its 4-cylinder engine, and about the same price as a base Acura RDX or a base Lexus NX 200T, and of course the Lexus has their 2-liter turbo under the hood. Although I personally find the front seats in the Q50 very comfortable, these are definitely less adjustable than some of the other luxury entries in this segment. It's very noticeable when you take a look at the power lumbar support. It's only a 2-way variety, and the passenger seat in the QX50 doesn't get adjustable lumbar support at all. Because of that omission, I'm going to have to drop the QX50's front seat score down to 8 out of 10 points, even though we do have a power tilt telescopic steering column with a large range of motion. The size difference between the QX50 now and the EX35 when it launched is very noticeable in the back seat. This vehicle has gone from having one of the smallest rear legroom figures to one of the largest in the segment. I have about 6 inches of legroom left sitting right here behind myself, and if I move all the way over to the right side of the vehicle, I still have about 3 or 4 inches left, even though this front seat is all the way back in its tracks, suitable for a 6'5" passenger I had there. The amount of headroom back here is perhaps a little bit surprising because of the overall side styling of the QX50. This has, again, that more sportback style on the side, perhaps a little bit closer to an X4, although we definitely have more room back here than we find in an X4. One thing you'll notice versus something like a Volvo XC60 is that we have a more pronounced hump right there in the center, although this center seat is actually fairly comfortable for a compact crossover. Even if I sit very upright back here, my hair is barely brushing the ceiling, still have enough headroom to do this. Although legroom and headroom are both generous in the back of the Q50, the rear bench seat is not quite as wide as some of the entries because the QX50 is actually a little bit narrower, especially than something like an Acura RDX. Unfortunately, when Infiniti stretched the QX50, they didn't stretch the cargo area. They only stretched the back seat, and that does mean that we have one of the smaller cargo areas in this segment. I was really only able to fit 3 of these 24-inch roller bags back here because you cannot put them stacked like this and still close the hatch. They stick out just a little bit too far, nor can you put them in this position and still close the hatch. Again, they stick out just a little bit too far. Now you can put them in a slightly different position, just barely right like this, and then you can lay one bag right down there and still close the hatch, but that leaves you a relatively small amount of area on the side. Our roller bag score of 3 24-inch roller bags is definitely on the small side for a compact crossover. Redeeming things a little bit, we have a spare tire under the cargo area load floor, which is getting a little bit rare these days, and a subwoofer right there in the center. We also have power folding and power rising rear seats, which make loading cargo into the vehicle just a little bit easier. You can also raise these seats up from the cabin if you'd prefer to, rather than back here in the cargo area. Because of the overall size of this cargo area and the fact that we don't get a roller tonneau cover standard in the QX50, I'm going to have to drop this trunk comfort score down to 7 out of 10 points. We do, however, have a well-positioned handle to help close the trunk lid. Taking a quick look around the interior, we have height adjustable seat belts for both the driver and the front passenger, and these large two-way adjustable headrests. Leather upholstery is standard in all QX50 models. This is a little bit different than the average European entry, where leather is now optional, and instead you get leatherette in most models. Infiniti uses soft touch plastics in the upper portions of the doors, this tan section right here, as well as the black section above that, but you will find hard plastics lower on the door, including around this very small door slot. We don't have a bottle holder there, just a small paper cubby. As we see with other Infiniti models, we have a lot of dark stained real wood trim right here, and we have very soft and squishy armrests. Moving over to the dashboard, we instantly recognize this very distinctive design feature of the QX50's interior. We have these 3 creases right there on the dashboard on the passenger side. Let me know what you think about this design choice down there in the comments section down below. We have soft touch injection molded plastics for the entire upper portion of the dashboard, including this darker section above the lighter section, but we do find harder plastics below that like we do in most compact crossovers. Below those creases, we find a fairly small bin-style glove compartment. I wasn't able to fit a tablet computer inside. You can really just fit the instruction manuals and very little else. The model we're testing has the optional up-level audio system, so we do have a Bose center channel speaker right here in the middle of the dash. Below that, we have our infotainment and navigation system. This software is very similar to what we see in the Infiniti Q70, but very different than what we see in the Infiniti Q50 or the QX30, which have the newer infotainment and navigation systems from Infiniti. Very much like the other Infinitis in the United States, you can control the screen via a toggle on the steering wheel, like I'm doing right there, this rotary knob right here, or you can actually touch the screen. Working our way down from there, we have the volume knob, preset buttons, optical disc player, 2-zone climate control, start-stop button right over here for the engine. At the bottom of the stack, we have a very small storage cubby where you could put a stick of gum, something like that, and a 12-volt power outlet right over there. We have a traditional console shifter. Drive is all the way to the back, manual mode over to the left, down for down, and up for up. Behind the shifter, we have a snow mode enable disable button. On either side of that, we have controls to raise the rear seats if they are lowered, and then we have heated seat dials on either side of that. You'll find the front seat cup holders behind this lid, and there's definitely enough room here for large takeout drinks. Between the front seats, we have a padded leather armrest. Opens to reveal a small storage cubby where you can put large smartphones, that sort of thing. This is where you'll find the USB and the auxiliary input and an additional power port. On the driver's side, we have a somewhat basic instrument cluster, tachometer on the left, speedometer on the right. We have our dimmer buttons over here on the left side. And then you'll find the buttons to navigate this multifunction display right over here on the right side. This is one of Infiniti's older multifunction displays, so it's not color, and we don't have too many customization options right there in the integrated menu. It's primarily just a trip computer. The steering wheel is one of Infiniti's 3-spoke designs. It's leather wrapped with sport grips right up top and sport grips a little bit lower on the wheel as well. On the left side of the wheel, we find some infotainment buttons, phone hang up button, there's a voice command button, back button, volume up, down, enter, and a source button. This toggle right here can also be used to change screens on that infotainment screen there in the center of the dash. On the right side of the steering wheel, we find the buttons for the radar adaptive cruise control, which our model has over here, and an enable-disable button for some of the vehicle's safety systems, like the lane departure warning system. Acceleration is nothing short of excellent. We ran from 0 to 60 in 5.6 seconds, which is low for this segment, but extremely low for an entry model. Keep in mind again that most vehicles in this segment start with a 2-liter 4-cylinder turbocharged engine. This is going to be between 1 and 2 seconds faster than the average base entry in this segment. Although a BMW X5 with their 3-liter turbocharged engine will be faster than the QX50, it's not going to be that much faster, and it's going to cost about $13,000 more. According to Audi, their brand new Q5 will be a little bit slower than the QX50, even with its optional 3-liter turbocharged engine. The reason for that is we do expect to see a new SQ5 version of that Q5. It's probably going to go from 0 to 60 about a half second faster than the QX50. But any version of the Q5 is going to cost more than the QX50. Like the acceleration score, the braking score is excellent. We ran from 60 to 0 in 117 feet, which is quite short for this segment. Handling is another area where the QX50 excels, and you can thank the relationship between this and the old Infiniti G sedan, not the new Infiniti Q50, for that handling ability, because the old Infiniti had an excellent driving nature. It really was the Japanese BMW, only it managed to be sharper than the BMW that it was trying to emulate, and that translates right over here to the Infiniti QX50. Because the QX50 pulls from the old Infiniti G's parts bin, we get a steering rack that's much more communicative than the average entry in this compact crossover segment, an absolutely excellent weight balance, fairly wide tires, and excellent total grip. Not only does the QX50 feel good out on the road, it also holds the road very well. The sporty mission of the QX50 is probably most notable out here on gravel roads, where we have a suspension that's definitely firmer than something like a Mercedes-Benz GLC, or even most versions of the BMW X3. BMW, of course, has optional sport suspensions for the X3, and I would say that they're going to be just about as firm as most models of the QX50. Although the suspension tune is far from punishing, I'm going to have to give the ride a B- score as far as this particular segment goes, because most of the entries are going to be a bit more compliant. Of course, as I frequently say, ride and handling are two ends of the same teeter-totter, and this vehicle definitely favors its handling ability. Although the QX50 excels when it comes to acceleration, braking, and handling, the two areas where it lags the competition is cabin noise and fuel economy. Cabin noise came in at 72 decibels at 50 miles an hour, so I'm going to have to give this a B-. We definitely get more wind noise and more road noise than we find in some of the newer entries in this segment, most notably the new Mercedes-Benz GLC as well as the BMW X3, and it's likely going to be that the Audi Q5 is going to be a little bit quieter than this as well. The other area where this falls down a little bit is fuel economy. We've been averaging 19 miles per gallon over a week of very mixed driving. That's a little bit lower than the EPA says you should be getting in this vehicle. It's also a little lower than some of the competition. If you compare a base QX50 to other base compact crossovers, you're going to find 5 to 7 miles per gallon better fuel economy in a number of those competitors. If you compare the QX50 to competitors that have 300 horsepower or above under the hood, you're still going to find 2 to 3 miles per gallon better fuel economy in the competition than in this vehicle. It's just due to the older engine design that we find under the hood, and the fact that this is not a turbocharged engine under the hood, it is a larger displacement V6. The QX50 is without a doubt one of the most fun compact crossovers you can buy in the United States. This does fall down just a little bit when it comes to fuel economy, the cabin noise score, and the overall styling of the interior. However, this is about the same price as an Acura RDX or a base Lexus NX200T, and this is much more fun than the NX, much more fun than the RDX, and actually I think the interior styling really doesn't look that much different than what we see in the Acura RDX. Let's start out talking about pricing in reverse order. The QX50 is one of the least expensive luxury crossovers out there, starting at $34,450. You'll notice on this chart that that is significantly less expensive than something like a BMW X3, the brand new Audi Q5, even the Volvo XC60. The key thing to remember about the QX50, of course, is that it comes standard with that 3.7-liter V6 engine, not the 2-liter turbo that they're putting in the Q50 as a base engine. That means the QX50 really competes a bit more directly with the BMW X3 in the 35i trim for $47,950. That is even more expensive than the QX50. Likewise, over on the Audi side, the Q5 3.0T starts at $46,400, and even the Volvo XC60, which has been one of the less expensive entries in this segment, is $46,350 if you want the T6 version of the XC. The Lincoln MKC really is the only direct competitor that manages to undercut the QX50 in terms of its base price, but if you want a similar amount of power under the hood, you're actually going to pay more than the QX50 for the 2.3-liter turbocharged engine in that Lincoln. Perhaps even more surprising than the low base price itself is what that base price actually buys you, because the power driver seat, 2-zone automatic climate control, Sirius XM satellite radio, leather upholstery, the moonroof, keyless entry and keyless go, and the 7-inch infotainment system are all standard. Now obviously we do need to address the elephant in the room that the QX50 is one of the older entries in this segment, and so it doesn't look as fresh on the inside or on the outside, but it is still one of the absolute best deals in this segment, not just because of the low base price, but what you get for that low base price. Again, keep in mind the QX50 starts as a rear-wheel drive vehicle with that 3.7-liter V6 engine and the 7-speed automatic transmission standard. If you want to add all-wheel drive, that's an additional $1,800. The value becomes perhaps more apparent when we start taking a look at the upper-level trims. Again, keep in mind that leather upholstery is standard in the QX50, but it's no longer standard in a wide variety of the competition. When we start taking a look at the fully loaded version of the QX50, you'll get the radar adaptive cruise control system, collision warning, the autonomous braking, lane departure warning, lane departure prevention, HID headlamps, the power second row seats, driver side lumbar support, all that sort of stuff for $41,350. Add an extra $1,800 for all-wheel drive, and you'll notice that is still thousands of dollars less expensive than the 300 horsepower engine options from the competition. So you could get an all-wheel drive QX50 with all of that on it for less than the base price of a comparable European luxury crossover that would go from 0 to 60 about as fast. Before we dive right onto competitive comparisons, we'll only be talking about 4 close competitors to the QX50: the Lexus NX, the Audi Q5, the BMW X3, and the Acura RDX. We're going to be talking about the Lexus and the Acura because they compare very well with the QX50 in terms of its base price and upper-level pricing, and we're going to be talking about the BMW X3 and Q5 because they're popular entries in this segment and they compare very well to the QX50 in terms of driving dynamics. The Lexus NX is one of the newer entries in this segment, and its base pricing and upper-end pricing tend to mirror what we see in the QX50 relatively closely. Comparing a comparable Infiniti to a comparable Lexus, the NX will be approximately $1,000 more expensive than the Infiniti, but more importantly than that, it's going to be significantly slower regardless of how you manage to configure that Lexus. The Lexus 2-liter turbocharged engine appears to have a power output level that's comparable to the European 2-liter engines that we see in BMWs, Audis, Mercedes models, Volvo models, etc. However, in real-world driving, it does end up being significantly slower than those European options, and the delta in terms of performance between the Lexus and the Infiniti is pretty large. In addition to the Infiniti unquestionably out-accelerating the Lexus, it out-handles it quite readily as well. The Lexus NX is available as either a front-wheel drive or an all-wheel drive vehicle, but all versions of the NX have a very front-wheel drive crossover type driving dynamic. The Lexus is also a little bit softer than the Infiniti, and that definitely plays into the handling ability out on the road. The Infiniti handles more like the old G sedan than the average crossover in this segment. Although Lexus has a well-deserved reputation for reliability, the QX50 has been a reliable vehicle as well, and it's also been on the market for some time, so we don't expect too many differences between the two. Audi's brand new Q5 is a very exciting entry in the luxury crossover segment. It's all new, it's all fresh, and I really like the way the Q5 looks on the inside and on the outside. It has quite simply one of the best interiors you can buy in the luxury crossover group. However, it is quite expensive when you compare it to the QX50. A base Q5 is going to be approximately $6,000 more expensive than the Q50. If you want the 3-liter turbocharged engine that gives you approximately the same kind of 0 to 60 performance that we see in the QX50, then you're going to be paying $46,400. That's $12,000 more expensive than the Infiniti. Without question, the Q5 is more luxurious, it has a more modern infotainment system, and it feels fresher inside and out, but the price delta between the two is very large. Interestingly enough, when it comes to handling, the QX50 really is going to beat all versions of the Audi Q5. The Q5 is an excellent handling vehicle for this segment. However, because of the design of the Audi Quattro system, the Q5 ends up being just about as front-heavy as a Volvo XC60, and that's not going on in the Infiniti. The BMW X3 is perhaps the quintessential can't-go-wrong pick in this segment. It's fun to drive, it's rear-wheel drive by default, you can get all-wheel drive, there are a variety of different engine options available. It has some of BMW's latest infotainment systems in the cabin, even though it actually manages to be one of the older entries in this segment. We should see an all-new BMW X3 in 2018. In general, BMW's offerings tend to be good value in the luxury segment for a traditional luxury entry, but just like the Audi Q5, there is a pretty big delta in terms of the MSRP between the QX50 and the X3 with the base 2-liter turbocharged engine, and that delta grows even larger if you start taking a look at the X3 with the 3-liter turbocharged engine. The X3 is one of the faster entries in this segment, and the X3 with that 3-liter turbo will be faster 0 to 60 than the Infiniti, but the delta is actually quite small, and without a doubt the QX50 is going to be much faster than the base engine in the X3. In terms of driving dynamics, the X3 is more engaging than the Audi Q5 in my opinion. However, BMW's latest designs have favored a little bit more ride comfort over handling, so you'll actually find slightly more engaging feel in the Infiniti QX50 than the BMW X3, but the BMW X3 is going to be a little bit more comfortable. Next up, we have the Acura RDX. The RDX and the QX50 remind me a great deal of one another, but they're sort of opposites of one another. The RDX is zippy. It goes from 0 to 60 in 5.8 seconds. It's nearly as fast as the QX50. It has a standard V6 engine under the hood, which is unusual in this segment. But the RDX starts as a front-wheel drive vehicle, and the QX50 starts as a rear-wheel drive vehicle. Therefore, although 0 to 60 performance is very equal, the handling dynamic is quite different between the two vehicles. Now, if you add all-wheel drive to both vehicles, the delta shrinks a little bit, because the RDX is fairly nimble thanks to its very, very lightweight construction. The RDX is several hundred pounds lighter than the average European entry in this segment, and it really shows. Although when you start pushing that RDX in corners, it's still going to plow like a more front-heavy vehicle, and that's not what you find in the Infiniti. So handling is definitely a win on the side of the QX50. Thanks to the front-wheel drive layout of the RDX, making it very space efficient, and the stretch that we see in the QX50, they both have very good rear legroom numbers for this segment, but the RDX is a little bit more practical when it comes to cargo capacity versus what we see in the Infiniti. And again, you can actually thank the rear-wheel drive layout of the QX50 for making that cargo area just a little bit smaller than we find in the Acura. Although the RDX is a little bit fresher than the Infiniti, I think they both come across as slightly less luxurious inside the cabin than the European options that are also in this segment. The reason that both of them seem just a little bit less premium is actually the same. Both of them use infotainment systems in the center console that just don't seem quite as modern or up-to-date as some of the European options, and both of them are using older designed instrument clusters. On the flip side, of course, the Acura and the Infiniti are going to be over $10,000 less expensive than anything in the European luxury segment that goes 0 to 60 as fast. My bottom line with the QX50 is that this is an excellent performance buy in the luxury compact crossover segment. If you're looking for a vehicle with excellent acceleration, excellent handling dynamics, and a very low base price, or a very low top-end price, definitely take a look at the Infiniti QX50. You will just have to keep in mind that the QX50 is not going to be quite as modern inside or outside the vehicle as the other European luxury options. But it is going to be approximately 20% less expensive, and that's a very, very large difference. At this point, my money is no object pick in this segment would be the Audi Q5 in its top-end 3.0T trim, while we do wait for the new SQ5 to arrive, and I think that a rational middle-of-the-road pick would be the current Volvo XC60, even though the XC60 is getting on a bit. We do expect to see a replacement soon, but the current generation XC60 is a good middle-of-the-road pick in this particular segment. Thanks for taking the time to check out this video. Again, I'm Alex Dykes. Be sure and check out those related videos on the side of your screen. Hit that subscribe button down there at the bottom of your screen, and I'll see you next week.